Today I wanted to share a lesson with you from my Remix course over on Build UI, where we add an authenticated state to the work journal app that we build. And I thought it was a good lesson to share because it's a great introduction to how cookie-based sessions work in HTTP. Hope you enjoy. Now that we've added the ability to create new entries, edit and delete them, we are going to be adding an authenticated state to our application because, once we deploy this, anybody would be able to create or edit or delete, and we want to restrict that to admins. So we're going to see how we can let users sign into our work journal app. And to do that, we are going to create a new login route. So let's come over to our app and we'll create a new login.tsx file. And here we can write our login page. So we see our new route is working. Let's go ahead and add some margin. And we're going to make a form using Remix's form component like we saw in earlier lessons. And this is going to have an email input and a password input. Let's go ahead and give this name of email, name of password. We don't need these IDs. And we can give them a placeholder as well. And let's also add a button to log in. We'll make this blue with some padding, text white, font medium. And we're just focused on the functionality right now, so this should work just fine for us. Now let's go ahead and add a class name of text gray 900 so we can see this. And this is our little login form right here. And we want to let the user enter an email, say sam@buildui.com, and a password, let's say password. Click login, and then maybe we'll show a message that says that they're logged in. So let's say we'll define an isAdmin Boolean, which if it is true, then we'll go ahead and add a message saying you're signed in. Otherwise, we'll render the form. And so when this is true, we'll see this. And if this is false, we'll show the form. So how can we submit this form, check the credentials, and then flip this variable from false to true? Well, we can use an action. If we make this post, we can define a new async function called an action. And just like we've seen, this is how we handle form submissions in Remix. So the action takes in action args. And here we get the request. And if we pop over to our index route here, we remember this is how we get the form data. So we'll just crib this, paste this in here. And now we are going to get the email and password from our form. So if email is equal to sam@buildui.com and the password is equal to password, then we should be able to sign in. Otherwise, we have bad credentials. So remember, this is an action. This runs in the server. So if we open up our server terminal and we type in sam@buildui and password, and I hit enter, we're going to get an error because we didn't return a value, but there we see sign in. So let's actually just return null for now. And if I hit login, we see bad credentials. We don't have that error anymore. And if I say sam@buildui.com and password, now we see sign in. So how can we use this data to update the UI? Well, actions can actually return data. So why don't we actually just return isAdmin true right here? And otherwise, we'll just return null. And now we need some way to get this data into our page. Well, if we look over at our index route, we've seen useLoader data before, which lets us get the data from the loader to render a page. And it turns out there is also a hook called useActionData. And this is going to give us the data from our action, which, if the credentials are right, will be this object. And so if we have data and it has an isAdmin key, we should see this message. So let's try logging in. And there we go. We see you're signed in because we submitted the form. It posted to the action. And once it's completed, this hook responded with this data. So now we are able to customize our UI based on these credentials being correct. However, if I refresh the app, we've lost that state. And this is because HTTP is stateless. So as soon as we create a new request here with the refresh button, we've lost all of the state from our previous post request. And we really need something durable, some data that is durable that we can use to associate subsequent requests with our form submission. So right here, when we actually verify the credentials, we want to create something that is durable that we can use. And this is where the idea of HTTP sessions come in. A session is data that can be associated across requests, that is associated with a particular user in a particular browser, and that lets us store data as a result of something like logging in so that we can use it on subsequent requests. And the way we are going to store our session data is inside of a cookie. And if you've never seen this before, we can actually come over to our browser, pop open the inspector, and if we click on the application tab, we'll see under storage, there is a section for cookies for our current URL. And right now we don't have any cookies at all. So right here, instead of returning this data, let's actually create a cookie. And the way we can create a cookie from our server-side action in our browser's storage here is to return a new response with a header called setCookie. And this is a comma separated value of key value pairs. So we could say admin equals 1. And once the browser gets this response back from the action, it's going to know to create a cookie right here. So let's see how this works. I'm going to refresh just so we have a clean slate. We don't see any cookies. sam@buildui.com, password. Check that out. As soon as I hit enter, we now have a cookie right here. And we can see it has a name of admin and a value of 1. And if we look at the network tab, we'll see the request that went out. It was a post request. And here is the response headers. And we can see there was that response header right there. So that's kind of how it all works. But now, if we come back to our cookie storage here, we see we have this cookie. And if I refresh, check this out, it's still there. So now that we have a cookie in the browser that is getting sent on every subsequent request, we don't want to use the action data to find this. We actually want to read this cookie value from those subsequent requests. So how do we do that? Well, now we want a loader, export async function loader, because we want our UI to be based on the request here. And we know that loaders get the request, loader args. And if we take a look at the request object, we are going to see headers. And if we go ahead and console.log the request headers, return true for now. Now we're back in loader land, which runs every time we refresh. Let's pop open the terminal. Here we're going to see all of the headers from the request, including this cookie, which the browser is now sending. So now we can get the cookie header. And this is going to give us just this string right here. So we can split this at the equals sign and grab the second element here. This should give us the admin value from our cookie right here. So if we console.log admin, we're going to see 1 every time I refresh. And if I were to go ahead and clear that cookie and refresh, now we see undefined. So now we can return from our loader is admin is going to be true if the admin cookie is equal to 1. And now instead of using the action data, we can use our loader data to get that value. Okay, let's refresh. We see the form. Let's type sam@buildui.com and password. Hit enter and check this out. We've got the cookie right here. And data.isAdmin is true. And if I hit refresh, moment of truth, it is still there as well. So this is kind of the end-to-end cycle of how session cookies work, we go ahead and sign in to the form. We don't need this anymore. If the credentials are correct, we create a cookie from the server. This is kind of the key trick here, right? Because the server is what's responsible for determining if these are the correct credentials. Right now, these are hard-coded in our application code, but of course, these could come from a database. But just for simplicity here, if those are correct, we get to set a cookie saying they're the admin, and that lets the browser store this data in its storage here. And on every subsequent request, it sends it out. And now we can use the loader to determine if they're an admin. So this is all very cool and very easy. I like seeing this entire flow here on a single page because it really helps me understand how all these pieces work. But there are some problems with the code we've written. There's quite a bit of wiring we have to do here. We are kind of splitting this string based on an equals sign. We are setting this data right here as a string. And more important than all of that is the fact that this is able to be tampered with here on the client. So right here, I can actually just change this to 0. Now I'm not logged in. And if I were to add this to 1 and refresh, I just signed in. So I just signed in by changing this cookie value and not using my email and password. So that's obviously insecure. And for all of those reasons, we actually don't want to do this by hand. And fortunately, Remix has our back here. We are going to use a built-in API from Remix called createCookieSessionStorage to handle all of this for us. So this API is going to create our session and store it in a cookie. And so if we look at the options here, we get to define the name of our cookie and some other options. Let's just start with the name for now, and we'll call it Work Journal Session. And this is going to give us a storage object. And this storage object has these 3 methods, which is getting the session from the storage, committing it, which is basically updating it, and destroying it. So this is like reading, writing, and deleting it. And these are basically the 3 methods on any storage that you have in Remix. So first, we want to get the session from our storage. And this is a promise. So we want to await this. And this is going to be our session. And now here, remember, we want to set admin to 1, but instead of doing it ourselves, we can just set data on this session object since we have a hold of it now. And we can do that using the set method. So let's set isAdmin to true. This also lets us work with primitives like Booleans instead of just strings. And now that we have our updated session, we want to go back to our storage and commit the session. And so we can pass in kind of our updated session here. This is also a promise, so we want to await it. And if we look at this, it says it stores all the data in our session and returns a set cookie header to be used in the response. So we actually want to just grab all of this and replace our value with it right here. So if we save that, we can just take a look at the general workflow. We create the storage here. The storage lets us retrieve the session, which we can update its values right here. And then we commit that once we've updated it, which in this case is responding with this set cookie header. So let's clear this, refresh. I'm going to say sam@buildui.com, password. And now we're going to see this work journal session cookie has some different values here. And importantly, if I were to make this a little bit bigger, we're going to see this is the actual value. And so this is a little strange. It doesn't look like this at all. But in fact, if I were to copy this and type in A to B and pass this string in, check that out. There is our data right there. So this is actually a base 64 encoded string, and A to B lets us convert ASCII to binary data. And so that's why we can kind of see this here. This is one of the things that this API is doing for us. Base 64 encoding just prevents problems with transmission, and again is just another reason why you want to kind of use the library methods here to do all of this cookie stuff. But with that, we have a much better starting point. And now we're not seeing the updated interface because right down here, we're still assuming the cookie was a plain string. So to read our cookie, we are going to actually grab the storage again in our loader. And we are going to get the session in our loader. But this time, when we get the session, we want to pass in the cookie header from the request. So that's going to be this right here. So this is going to let us get rid of all this kind of splitting and parsing, the stuff that's really finicky that we were doing ourselves. This is going to let us use the Remix APIs to get the session. And now let's go ahead and just console.log this session. For now, we'll return true. And if I pop open the console, there we see our session, and we can actually take a look at the session's data, and we'll see is admin true right there. So now we can just return the session data. That's going to flow through here. And if is admin is true, we'll see signed in, which we do. And if we clear the cookie and refresh, we go back to the form. So we can actually get some types here, just like we did in earlier lessons. This is going to be type of loader. And so this is always going to be defined. But now we can sign in. And everything works just like before. So this is how we use this session storage API from Remix. And at this point, since we want these things to agree in our action and our loader, let's go ahead and extract this. This is usually what I do. Come out and we'll make a session.ts file in the root of our project here. And we can just grab this, go ahead and import this. And again, storage has these three methods: get, commit, and destroy. That's really the interface that we want to expose. So let's just do structure, get, commit, and destroy. And we'll export these from this module. And back in our page, we don't need to create the cookie storage anymore. We can just import get session from our little module and commit session. And then same down here, we don't need to create it. We can just import get. And so this is a bit cleaner if we kind of zoom out and take a look. We don't need this directly in here either. We render a form. When we submit the credentials, we get our session, we update some value to true, and then we commit the session. And then in our loader, we can read the session from the cookie header and respond with that. So Remix is now kind of doing all of the serialization and deserialization for us. However, we can still actually tamper with this on the client. So if I were to bring this up, we A to B this. I could actually copy this and we can B to A it to go the opposite direction, meaning I could just set this to false, go ahead and update it right here in my browser. Now I'm not signed in, but again, if I grab the string that represents an admin and paste this in, which doesn't contain my password here, right? We're just base64 encoding this plain data. Now I'm signed in. So even though we have encoded these, we haven't secured them. They are not secure. And if we come over to our session here and we actually look at the Remix dev server, if we restart this, Remix is going to help us out here and say the work journal session cookie is not signed, but session cookies should be signed to prevent tampering on the client before they're sent back to the server. So that's what we just saw here. And fortunately, this API makes it really easy. We have an option here called secrets, and this can be anything that your server knows and is never shared. For our case, let's just say build UI secret, something like that. And let me go ahead and show you how this works. I'm going to clear the cookie again. I'm going to sign in. And now if we look at our session, we're going to see the value here, and this is just like before, but now we have a period and this new value right here. This is a signature that our server created using the secret from our cookie session, as well as the values that we set right here. And signatures is how we keep this secure, because when we read the cookie right here in our loader, we're using the same session with the same secret, which means we're going to validate that this signature came from our server. So this is how cookies can be encrypted such that you know the value was never tampered with. And so even though this first part right here is exactly the same, I can paste this in here. We can still see the data. If I were to come here and change anything about the signature, add a little W right there, refresh, it's not going to work. It only is going to work if the signature is actually the one generated from the server, which needs that secret. So again, pretty cool to understand how all this works, but now our cookie is secure. There's nothing the user can do to log in here other than by going through this code path where we validate the email and password in our action. And just to be thorough here, I'm going to just drop in a few more options to our session cookie that are good defaults to have. This came from the Remix site. You can look into these later, but these are going to set some more values. So again, if we were to clear that, sign in, you'll see some of those show up in some of these columns over here. But with that, let's go ahead and wrap this lesson up by working on this flow from our login route. So now we kind of have everything wired up. We can see we're signed in right now. Let's go ahead and clear our cookies and start from scratch here. And when we first sign in, let's actually redirect back to the home page here. It's normally what you would see after logging in, and we can do that with the redirect helper from Remix. We'll redirect back to slash, and redirect also accepts our header right here. So let's say sam@buildui, password. Now we're back home. And how do we customize our home page based on the session? Well, now we can add the session to the home page loader. And maybe we'll only show this form if we're actually signed in as an admin. So let's come to our index page. I'll open the loader. We'll get the session. And for this, we need the request. And now we can return the session data here alongside our entries. So right now we're just returning an array of entries. Let's make this an object with entries. And so these will be destructured like this. But now we'll also add our session data just like this. And so we should be able to read the session. And let's come down to our form right here, create a new entry with the form, and let's wrap this whole thing in a session.isAdmin conditional. Okay, we see the form. Let's go ahead, clear these cookies, refresh, and check this out. We are hiding the form if the user is not an admin, if they're just a guest. But if we were to go back to login, sam@buildui, password. Now we're redirected, the loader has the session, and now we can start customizing our UI based on the auth state of our session. And it looks like we have one more error here. Our loader is returning these entries under the entries key. So let's just fix this up. And that is the basic way we can now use this session to customize everything from how our UI looks to which actions are allowed. And it's all thanks to this cookie, which is the standard way that we can associate new data with requests in HTTP. And we can make sure our cookies are safe for transmission and secure by using this createCookieSessionStorage API from Remix. So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed that. Remix really is an awesome framework, so if you want to watch the rest of the course, check out the link below. And I also wanted to mention that we currently have an early bird sale going on. Normally, a lifetime membership to Build UI is $249, but from now until October 11th, you can get 40% off. That's just $149 for a lifetime membership, which includes all of our current courses on Framer Motion, Tailwind, React Server Components, and Remix, as well as lifetime access to every course we've put out. We've got a Radix UI course coming out next month, and we've got a ton of content planned for the site. So if you're interested in that, check out the link below. Otherwise, thank you for watching.